You can hear 2 seconds of a Queen song, you know exactly who it is. It's such a distinctive sound.
The way he connected with that stadium, those thousands and thousands of people, I've never seen anything like it.
Many bands have kind of tried and failed to become the best stadium rock band of all time. I don't think anybody comes close to Queen.
Freddie Mercury was born Farrokh Bulsara in British colonial Zanzibar. At the age of 8, he was sent to St. Peter's boarding school in Bombay, where he formed his first band, the Hectics, who covered Little Richard songs. It was here that his friends began to call him Freddie.
He was in a band called the Hectics, and he was the keyboard player. And there are pictures, sepia pictures of him looking very much like Little Richard with the brill creamed hair. And in a sense, his piano style, which was very untrained, he put his hands hanging off the edge of the keyboard. He never learned how to pick them up properly. Extremely bold, extremely instinctive player. And I think you can see a lot of the Little Richard kind of playing in that, the early rock and roll influences.
Little Richard did play a key influence in Freddie's musical heritage. He also took inspiration from an artist much closer to home.
Freddie Mercury was a man who was influenced by many, many singers. When he was a kid in Bombay, he went to see Lata Mangeshkar, who was an Indian Bollywood playback singer. And she wasn't flamboyant at all, but she did have a remarkable vocal range.
The Zanzibar Revolution of 1964 meant Freddie's family fled the country for the UK. He began studying at Ealing Art College near his home in Feltham, London. The city had been blown away by the arrival of Jimi Hendrix, and Freddie too had fallen under his spell.
It wasn't just the usual interest that a young man of that age had in Hendrix. He was a great guitar player. There was something about him that fascinated him. His early sketchbooks from Ealing Art College and his folders were covered in these beautiful pictures that he'd done of Hendrix. And you can see the mannerisms of Hendrix way into his live career himself. The way that Hendrix would kind of drool over his guitar and bend over it is exactly what Freddie Mercury did with his little signature sawn-off microphone stand.
Anyone who was around that time was influenced by Jimi Hendrix because he just took things to another level. Some of the blues musicians in London were very serious, and Jimi Hendrix just kind of came along and set things on fire and just went absolutely all out to entertain people and to grab people's attention.
After a string of unsuccessful ventures, Freddie joined the band Smile, who were formed of guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor, but were missing a singer. Freddie convinced the band to take on the new name of Queen, and with the 1971 inclusion of bassist John Deacon, they began working together.
Queen were unusual in that they were 4 competing songwriters, and they all wrote hit singles individually. Now, Freddie Mercury was unquestionably a great frontman, but Queen were much more a collaborative democracy. Brian May, he's a man with a stubborn determination. He was nobody's sideman. John Deacon, the man who refuses to join the reinvigorated Queen, he's a man with a mind on its own. Roger Taylor, he's a drummer capable of writing hit singles. No one's going to shove him aside. It wasn't Freddie Mercury's band. It was a democracy.
Freddie used his time at Ealing to design a logo for the band. The crest is made of the zodiac signs of the whole group: 2 Leo lions for John Deacon and Roger Taylor, a cancer crab for Brian May, and 2 fairies to represent Freddie's Virgo sign. The new band wrote 2 self-titled albums in the early 70s that initially didn't threaten the top of the charts, but slowly gathered an audience.
Queen 1 and Queen 2 weren't hugely successful at the time, but I think ultimately they were really important in forging the band that Queen were going to become. Certainly, they were kind of prog and heavy metal, like classics. I think people look back on it and you realise how influential those records actually were.
Queen 1 was very much Queen finding their way, as it tends to be with debut albums. But it started with Keep Yourself Alive. What a way to begin a career, this blistering, all-out rock anthem, which today still sounds fantastic.
They're good albums. They're they represent young guys in that period and what they did, wearing their vintage clothing, going to the National Gallery to stare at paintings called things like the Fairy Fellas Masterstroke and turn these literary and artistic ideas into song.
Despite Seven Seas of Rhye giving the band their first top 10 hit, the music press weren't fully won over.
Queen from the start were not critics' favourites by any means. I mean, the NME in particular was not huge fans of Queen, and Queen not huge fans of them. I mean, there was a famous article where they went and interviewed Freddie Mercury and had a really nice time, and then ran the interview with the headline, "Is this man a prat?"
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet.
In 1974, Queen released Sheer Heart Attack, which would prove to be an international success, giving the band a #2 single with Killer Queen.
I think by the time Queen released Sheer Heart Attack, they were really kind of proving that they were trying out different things. It was completely new for the band. They were trying different genres and different styles that they'd never had before. So it was a really interesting time for them. They were really progressing kind of musically and creatively at that point.
Sheer Heart Attack was a real step forward for Queen, I think, because it was more bombastic, it was more of them coming into their own, and it was from this point onwards where they really started to have 1, 2, 3, 4 hits per album, and for this one it was Killer Queen, which is still one of Queen's signature tunes.
The band continued to build on their success with the ambitious A Night at the Opera, the name being taken from the Marx Brothers film, which the group watched during the recording. It was the most expensive album ever made at the time of its release, but would go on to be multi-platinum across the globe.
A lady's diamond earring has been lost. It looks exactly like this. In fact, this is it.
A Night at the Opera is Queen's kind of most well-known album, probably the most successful album, and I think that's for a reason. It's because it's absolutely amazing. I think by this point they were kind of showing they were aiming big and that they were being bombastic and they were doing absolutely kind of proving what they wanted to achieve. I mean, the album's got Bohemian Rhapsody on it. I think that's all I need to say.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
Bohemian Rhapsody was released on Halloween in 1975 and went straight to #1 in the UK.
Overfamiliarity has kind of dulled just how weird and how peculiar Bohemian Rhapsody was. Nothing had sounded like it before, or in fact, since.
As a modern rock song, you know, it is in every best rock song of the last 50 years list. It is still an incredible power ballad and ingenious as well. It was really kind of breaking away from a traditional rock song.
Because the video to Bohemian Rhapsody was such an essential part of the song's success, Queen were probably one of the first groups who understood that you could sell music through video. Everyone else had just seen as just something to give to Top of the Pops when they weren't in the country, a kind of very poor in-concert film.
It was the first time that they'd made something that could be put on Top of the Pops so that they could go on tour and not even be there. And no wonder, because they could never perform that opera section live, and they never pretended to. They used to just clear off on stage and have a drink while it plays.
Galileo, Galileo, Galileo Figaro. Magnifico! We are the champions, my friends.
Famously, Freddie Mercury was very much influenced as a performer by people like Liza Minnelli, Hendrix, and Little Richard, and I think you can really see that in his onstage theatrics. It's very, very over the top and theatrical, and it really grabs the attention of the crowd and keeps them.
In terms of their live performances, they were a very precise band. Everything was robotically worked out. They didn't deviate much from their set. They didn't do long, sprawling improvisations or pop new songs in to surprise people. They just did what worked, and they did it over and over again.
Queen started the 1980s with the release of The Game, and with it ended their no synthesizers disclaimer that had been attached to each prior album. The Game featured two of their best-selling singles ever, Another One Bites the Dust and the rockabilly-inspired Crazy Little Thing Called Love. The band continued to experiment in new musical directions, and in 1982 released the dance-oriented Hot Space, where they worked with another progressive musician, David Bowie, on Under Pressure.
Under Pressure, the track Queen did with Bowie was, I think, kind of came about by accident, which is kind of amazing. I think Bowie went along to record something else in vocals, and they ended up making this song together. And it's just a meeting of legends on one track. It's absolutely astounding.
The Bowie collaboration for Under Pressure was a complete fluke. I think they had one day where they decided to meet up, and I do remember hearing that John Deacon had written that bass part, ding, 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 and then they'd all gone out for a pizza and completely forgotten it when they got back. And they knew that they had this thing that was the basis for a really good song. They basically had to sit and remember it all over again.
Two of the most important rock stars of the past, 40, 50 years. They're just really, you cannot underestimate the profound impact those two have had on popular culture and music.
After their time with David Bowie, the band pushed further into electronics with the album The Works. The new sound lifted their success in Europe, but lost numbers in the US. But with the first two singles, Radio Gaga and I Want to Break Free, they produced two of pop music's most iconic videos.
I want to break free. I want to break free.
In terms of my favourite Queen music videos, I think I Want to Break Free just sticks in my mind every time. Like, the band dragged up, mincing around the front room, hoovering. I mean, like, it's absolutely insane in an amazing way.
God knows I want to break free.
I Want to Break Free, which was Roger Taylor's girlfriend suggesting that they just dress up in drag and do this sort of skit on Coronation Street. And there were moments of that were ridiculous, like the way Freddie Mercury keeps his moustache on when he's dressed as a woman and shaves it off when he's playing a male ballet dancer.
But life still goes on.
They were never afraid to be brave. They were braver in their videos, such as where they're all dressed in drag for I Want to Break Free, than they often were in their music.
All we hear is Radio Gaga, Radio Goo, Radio Gaga.
They made best use of the music video in the 1980s once the MTV era had begun. So once you had people like Michael Jackson doing concept videos that were perhaps only loosely linked to the lyrics of the song, and they were great at that. So they had the Fritz Lang-inspired one for Radio Gaga, which is as famous as the song.
Queen quickly understood that you could make mini films. And because of this, and certainly in a later period when it was impossible for Freddie Mercury to tour, then this is how they kept the visual side of Queen alive. And they were a huge touring band as well. They played very infrequently in Britain because they were so busy touring the world.
In 1985, Queen were asked to perform at Live Aid. The event, organised by Sir Bob Geldof, was to raise money and draw attention to the ongoing Ethiopian famine. Everyone agreed that Queen stole the show.
What Live Aid reminded everybody was that Queen were a great live band. They stole Live Aid, as everybody knows. The interesting thing is, it wasn't a Queen audience. It was a general pop audience. So therefore, everyone who played Live Aid at Wembley was starting from the same point.
If Bohemian Rhapsody is the song that encapsulates Queen to most people, then Live Aid is the performance that encapsulates them. It's just a band at the absolute peak of their powers.
I don't think Live Aid was that important in terms of revitalizing Queen's status because, they had released Radio Gaga, which is one of their biggest hits, just the year before. So they were still kind of at the top of their game. But what I think Live Aid ended up being this incredible platform for them for reminding people what an incendiary live band they were.
Reinvigorated on the back of the success of Live Aid, the band recorded their 12th album, A Kind of Magic. The title track had a groundbreaking video directed by Russell Mulcahy and animated by Disney.
One dream, one soul, one prize, one golden glance of what should be.
I was a child when I first heard Queen, and I was captivated, and I don't know what it was, but it was something, combination of cartoon-like appeal and this sense of maybe sexuality that you didn't quite understand yet.
They had their early rock phase, they had their middle expansionist phase, then they discovered disco, surprisingly. Then they became a pop singles band, and then for their last few albums, they became a rock band.
The 1980s saw every member of Queen branch out into their own solo work. Brian May recorded Starfleet Project with fellow guitarist Eddie Van Halen. Roger Taylor released 2 hard rock albums, Fun in Space and Strange Frontier, while John Deacon recorded tracks with the likes of Elton John. Freddie made his mark with his debut solo album, Mr. Bad Guy, in 1985.
I like Queen very much, but I mean, I don't want to end up living a quartet. I'm 37 years old, and I want to do something different, and it's about time I did, otherwise I'll get too damn old and I'll be in a wheelchair.
Freddie teamed up with the operatic soprano Montserrat Caballé for his second solo album. The lead single, Barcelona, was a big success.
That relationship was possibly the only time where Freddie Mercury has completely subsumed his ego to someone else. You know, she was a diva not just in voice, but in terms of attitude and stridency as well. And he was the pupil, she was the teacher, and she told him exactly what to do and how to sing with her and against her.
I think the only reason that Barcelona was such a massive success was that he was artistically in love with Montserrat Caballé, and he was ill, and he had a sort of an egg timer going, basically. He needed to get this thing done because he'd just been diagnosed as having full-blown AIDS, and that's why that project is so strong creatively, is that there was a reason for him to get it done.
On the 23rd of November 1991, Freddie made an announcement to the media regarding his health, confirming he had AIDS. Just a day later, he died at the age of 45.
Those were the days of our lives.
The last video featuring Freddie was These Are the Days of Our Lives.
Things in life were so few.
I think Freddie's illness and his disappearance was quite symbolic of the way that people were feeling about AIDS and HIV at the time. It was still regarded as a secret and something to be ashamed of, and nobody wanted to talk about it.
Freddie Mercury had the illness in a very precise period in the illness's history where there was no hope for you, and he went down the same way Denham Elliott did and Rock Hudson. And there are musicians in the public eye who have the HIV virus now and are well.
I think ultimately it opened up a dialogue about the illness, and ultimately it meant that maybe people felt like people were talking about it finally, and although it was very difficult at the time, maybe led to kind of people being able to come out and kind of be more open about the fact that they had this illness as a result of all the exposure that Freddie had at the time.
I still love you.
Freddie made a remarkable return to the stage at the 2012 London Olympics. Using footage from Queen's 1986 concert at Wembley, he led a call and response with the crowd, proving that Queen's legacy remains intact.
I think the great thing about Queen was the combination of musicians in that band. I just think the real magic was between the four of them.
They had the anthems, they had the ridiculous hair, they had the ridiculous outfits, they had, and most importantly, I think their fans really connected with their music. I think the love between band and fans is something that you can't predict. No one's kind of matched it as Queen.
Freddie was built and constructed to seduce stadiums full of people. But no one played stadiums like Queen. No one understood how you do it better than Queen.